I started going into, no, that's okay, Cindy, no worries. Um, I started private practice, Galperin Autism Consulting. And I do want to take just a couple of minutes really quickly just to sort of talk about what we do, and then also talk about that there are other folks in the area who do things similar to what we do. We're not the only game in town. So Galperin Autism Consulting consists of me, and then I have some part-time contract therapists that work for me. And we are doing three main things. One, we are providing counseling, mental health counseling for individuals on the spectrum. And for the most part, that starts around age 13 and goes up. There have been some exceptions where we have met with kids younger than 13, but it's kind of rare. And we do everything via telehealth, which also accounts for the fact that doing counseling for young ones via telehealth isn't always the best method. So typically 13 and up. And it is direct one-on-one mental health counseling for those folks on the autism spectrum. And then second, we also do counseling and consultation for family members of folks who are on the spectrum. So as most of us, I'm sure, are well aware, when a person receives services, whether that's speech, whether that's OT, whether that's an IEP, whether that's a job coach, whatever that service is, it's always geared towards the person with a developmental disability, which obviously that makes sense. However, there really isn't anything that's specifically designed for family members. And this is parents, this is siblings, this is grandparents, whoever the guardians may be. And so we're working on providing a combination of counseling and consultation for those family members so that they feel like they are in a better place. They are taking care of their own mental health. They are getting consultation and education so that they are feeling like they are in a better place so that then they can provide better support for people in their family, particularly their kids. Okay. And then the third thing that we're doing is we're doing training and education for agencies. So this is just one example of something like that. But we have done them for service providers. We've done them for school systems. There's pretty much no limit on who we can provide it to. So those are the three main services that we provide, and the first two really are the main ones: the counseling for folks on the spectrum, and then the counseling and consultation for family members. Okay. I wanted to put these up here, and again, you will have access to this PowerPoint, particularly when you go into the breakout rooms, and so you'll be able to download this. But these are other resources in the Cincinnati area that do similar things. They're not all exactly the same, but these folks do similar things. There's Exceptional Minds. I won't sit here and read them all to you. The one I would say for a lot of people is the only one that I know of. Now, there may be others that I don't know about, but the only one that I know of that takes Medicaid is Envision, which is on the west side. Galperin Autism Consulting is private pay only, which is what a lot of our folks are. But as far as I know, Envision is the only one that takes Medicaid. So yes, I'm here and I'm talking about Galperin Autism Consulting and doing counseling for folks on the spectrum, but these other agencies also do it, and they're easily found through a simple Google search. Okay, so today I'm going to go through a little bit of a presentation. I'm going to be talking about emotional regulation for folks on the autism spectrum, and it can be used for folks who have other developmental disabilities. It's not just an autism thing. It can be a developmental disability thing. And to be frank, it can be used with typically developing folks as well. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a presentation on that. We're going to go into breakout rooms where you will have 5, 6, 7 people in a breakout room. You'll have a little bit of an assignment. You'll work together to come up with something, and then we'll come back, and then somebody will report to the bigger group about what you came up with. And then we'll do a little wrap up. Okay. All right. So the topic of today is visual and organizational emotional regulation strategies. So we know folks who are on the spectrum often struggle with recognizing the emotions that they're feeling, identifying what those emotions are, and then implementing something to help them regulate that emotion. This is very common in folks who are on the autism spectrum. There are a number of strategies for emotional regulation that are out there. I'm going to talk specifically today about three. There are others out there, but these are three that most people have probably heard of or have seen. And if you haven't, you can Google them and they will immediately come up. Okay. So one is zones of regulation, and I'll get into it in just a minute. Then there's also something called the Incredible 5-Point Scale. And then there's also something called How Does Your Engine Run? And again, all three of these are emotional regulation strategies. There are things about them that are similar, but there are also some differences as well. What I want to point, so one, I want to point out what those three things are, but then I also want to talk about how you can individualize these strategies for each particular person that you're supporting. Because I think just like any strategy for anything, whether it has to do with autism or developmental disabilities or anything, any strategy you come up with is not going to work perfectly for each and every single person. You're going to have to tailor it a little bit. And so that's our hope, is that when you are done with this presentation today, that you feel like you've got a little bit of a better idea of how can I take this thing that's designed for everybody and tweak it a little bit so that it works better for my individual person that I'm supporting. Okay. So zones of regulation, again, you can Google it. There's a whole curriculum that comes with the zones of regulation. I think it's a 100 and some page book. I'm not worried about going through all of the details of it, but today I just want to point out that for those who aren't familiar with it, what zones of regulation does is it tries to put emotions into categories or zones. And there are typically, what you will see is that there are 4 zones, and there are a number of different feelings or emotions that are in each zone. Okay. And so typically the blue zone is for things like being tired or feeling sick or feeling really sad. And then green zone is usually, that's your okie dokie. Things are good. People are calm, cool, and collected. Then your yellow zone is usually for things like I'm starting to get worried. I'm getting a little overstimulated. I'm a little stressed out. And then red zone is usually things like anger, rage, things like yelling, screaming, throwing things. And so if you think about emotions, and we have tons and tons and tons and tons of them, and many of them are similar. And so you can sort of group them into zones. And so if you're a person with autism and you're having a hard time sort of identifying how you may be feeling or where a particular emotion fits, then zones of regulation is a good way to be able to help figure that out and to be able to communicate to somebody else, I'm feeling I'm in the blue zone or I'm in the yellow zone. So it's a really good method for being able to communicate to someone else how you're feeling, in addition to learning how to identify how you're feeling yourself. So one important point I wanted to make, and this is true of zones of regulation, but it's also true of the other 2 that we're going to talk about. We want to make sure that everybody understands that everybody has the right and is allowed to be in whatever zone they are in. Right? I'm never going to tell a kid, you can't be angry, you can't be mad. You can't be frustrated because they may very well have a very legitimate reason for being angry. And even if I don't think it's a reason for them to be angry, they have the right to be angry about something. So I know sometimes when we see these, people feel like, oh, kids have to be in the green zone. And if they move into the yellow zone, then they're doing something wrong and they need to fix it and get back to the green zone. And that's not what these are designed to do. They are designed to be able to help a kid recognize, I feel this way. It's okay that I feel this way. And there are things I can do to help me feel better. So again, it's not about you're supposed to be in the green zone. It's about recognizing and identifying where you are so that you can use some coping strategies to help yourself feel better. Okay. There's also the incredible 5-point scale, which in some ways is similar. Sometimes you will see it color coded in a similar fashion to zones of regulation. But the incredible 5-point scale is exactly what it sounds like. You're putting things into a 1 through 5 scale. Okay. You can use this for all kinds of different things. You can use this for emotions, okay, but you can use it for all kinds of other things too. And I don't want to overcomplicate it because it really is this simple as you're putting things into a 5-point scale. Okay. Then there's also something called how does your engine run? So if you think about your emotions and how it makes your body feel, right? If you think about if you are super happy, you're excited, or you are frustrated and angry, might your engine, might your body be running really fast, right? And so you could be happy and excited and have your engine running really, really fast, but you can also be angry and have your engine running really, really fast. And so some folks really do identify better with using something that shows essentially how revved up you are or how slow your engine is running, right? So again, if your engine is running slow, is it because you're tired? Is it because you're sick? Is it because you're sad? Right? Obviously, again, what we would want people to feel like is that their engine is running just right. But again, because somebody's engine is running too slow, we don't want to tell them it's not okay for your engine to run slow. It is okay because that's life and that's going to happen. But what we want is to identify that, and then are there some things that we can do to help your engine get back to running just right? Okay. So that's the third one. And then before we get into how we're going to individualize these things for people, I wanted to show this. And just so folks know, like this is what I use whenever I'm supporting somebody with autism or a developmental disability. And looking at how do I need to individually tailor what I'm doing to them. And this isn't anything formal, it's very informal. It's not like I keep a running document of all these things, although I could. But I wanted to give folks an idea of some of the things that you can and should consider whenever you're supporting somebody on the spectrum, and so that we can apply it to this particular activity. So things I'm looking at, obviously, when we're talking about autism, we're talking about social communication. So I want to look at their social communication skills. But I also want to look at their sensory differences, their cognitive level or their intelligence. I want to look at what are they paying attention to? What are they not paying attention to? How long can they maintain their attention? I'm looking at their mental health. I'm looking at their physical health, which often in autism gets overlooked. I'm looking at their learning style. Like, how do they learn best? Do they learn auditorily? Do they learn visually? Do they learn concretely or abstractly? I'm looking at their motor skills. Because obviously, I don't want to design something for them to use that they don't have the motor skills to be able to do. So if it's somebody who struggles with fine motor skills, do I want to give them something that's going to require fine motor skills? And the obvious answer is no. I also want to look at their executive functioning. And then I also, and probably, quite frankly, one of the more important ones is them as a human being, them as a person. Who are they? What are their interests? What do they like? What do they dislike? So those are all the things that I looked at. So when you guys break into small groups, what I would like for folks to do is you can use this as a guide if you want in helping to determine how you're going to design something for someone. Okay. All right. So this is what, again, if you Google zones of regulation or you've seen it, you will see various versions of this where there's a blue zone, a green zone, a yellow zone, and a red zone. And I want to talk, and a lot of times you'll see the posters. Lots of classrooms in our schools have these. You may see these in therapist's office. And a lot of times they're slapped up on a wall for people to be able to see and use. But I want to look at different ways where we could individualize these things for people. So I'm just going to show this example. This is one example of how someone could individualize zones of regulation for a particular person. Okay, so in this example, we have the use of this person's narrow interests, right? So this is the person that loves Inside Out. Everything about them is all Inside Out. Talks about Inside Out all the time, watches Inside Out all the time, loves doing activities that involve Inside Out. Can we use that and incorporate it into helping them learn how to use zones of regulation by incorporating something they're going to want to pay attention to? And in this case, that's what this person has done. But they have also individualized it by putting in single words along with the picture of the characters. So we're looking at developmentally, like, where is their reading level? And are they reading and comprehending single words? Are they reading and comprehending full sentences? Or are they reading and comprehending paragraphs? And in this particular instance, this was somebody that, again, could process and use single words, but we also paired those single words with pictures. And then here's another example of ways to individualize zones of regulation. So again, we're looking at a narrow interest. And for this particular kid that I worked with, loved LeBron James. And so you'd be amazed what you can find when you go to Google and type in LeBron James angry, LeBron James happy. Images all come up. And I was able to pull these off and then incorporate them. And then I also, for this particular person, reduced the number of categories. So typically in zones, there's 4. Sometimes you'll actually see them with 5. Sometimes you can back them down to 3, and you can even do 2 sometimes. So what I've done is I've used an interest of his, but then I've also reduced the number of choices because for this individual person, being able to choose from 3 choices is easier than choosing from 4 or 5. So I felt like I wanted them to be able to relatively easily make a choice without being overwhelmed, right? So particularly if somebody is having some strong feelings and we're wanting them to be able to identify them and communicate them, the last thing we want to do is give them too much information and only make that feelings of stress and anxiety and overwhelm even more. Okay? So those are just a couple of examples of how you can individualize zones of regulation. Same thing with incredible 5-point scale. Okay, you can individualize these, and again, this is an example right here that actually does use color, although you don't have to use color. This one has a combination of single words or short phrases and sort of the old school emoji pictures before emojis were a thing. Um, and then, but you can look at, are there ways to be able to tailor this for somebody? So in this particular example, we have used color. Here you can see one is green, two is blue. Okay, so we've used color to help provide some additional information on how they're feeling. But we also can look at, can we teach them or help them teach us what does a number two look like, right? Because maybe for me, in my life, what it looks like for me to be at a two may be very different than what you would look like and feel like at a two, right? And so a lot of times we can help put these into categories and give them a way to be able to document on there, what does a five look like? What does a five feel like? And again, maybe they are able to help communicate that to us so that we know. Or if they're having trouble, maybe we can help them recognize, what do you look like when you're a five? And you can also incorporate coping skills into these. So, okay, you recognize that you're a three. When you're a three, it looks like this and it feels like this. But then what can you do when you're a three, right? So maybe it's, when I'm at a three, I can take a break and listen to music for 5 minutes, right? So that they don't have to try and remember and memorize all these coping strategies. If you have a little chart there that they can refer to, then they can eventually be able to recognize, okay, I'm at a four. This is how I feel. This is what I look like. Here's the coping strategy that I can try. Okay. Then you can also look at, how does your engine run? And is there a way to be able to individually tailor that? And of course, the answer is yes. And here is just one example. Okay. So maybe it isn't having sort of those three different colors. Maybe it is more like a speedometer or a tachometer, and being able to show people sort of how far their engine is revved up, right? So you, again, there's different ways to be able to do it. This is just one example of a different way that you could do it. There are many others. Okay. So I want to, and I know I went kind of quick, but I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time for people to go into breakout rooms. We're going to randomly assign you into breakout rooms. Each breakout room will have one facilitator in it. And when you go into your room, what we would like for you to do is to pick, and there's probably going to be like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people in each breakout room. And we'd like for each group to sort of pick a real world example of somebody that they are working with, whether it's a student in a classroom, or somebody you're seeing for therapy, or whatever, and pick a person, and then pick one of these three strategies, whether it's zones of regulation, whether it's the incredible 5-point scale, whether it's how does your engine run, and then think about that individual person and think about developmentally, where are they? Academically, where are they? Are there sensory issues that you might need to consider? And you can go back and look at that presentation and go through the slides and look at those 10 things that I had identified as things that I always assess. And then come up with an idea of what strategy you might use and what it might look like and why. And then when we get back together, we're going to have one person from each group give like a 2-minute spiel. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be drawn out. It doesn't need to be complicated, but just a quick 2-minute little spiel on why you came up with what you came up with, and try to be able to give us like 3 reasons why you chose what you chose or why you designed what you designed. Okay. And then if you have questions when we get into the breakout rooms, that will be a good time to ask, and the facilitators should be able to help answer your questions. We'll be in the breakout rooms for 15 minutes. And then when we come back, um, we will um, we will be able to have everybody present to everyone else. Sound good? And Sadie, I think you can take back over and put people in their correct rooms.
Yep, great. Yep. So Tom, myself, Amy Duncan, Amanda Tipkemper, and Lauren Jones will be your facilitators. I mean, really, you guys we'll all be doing the work, but just kind of moving things along and keeping an eye on the time. So I'm gonna open all the rooms right now, and I know some of you can't participate in the breakout rooms. No worries. If you're moved into a room and you just need to have your camera off and your mute on, do what you need to do. No worries there. But I'm going to open all the rooms right now and see you guys back here in the main room in about 15 minutes. Okay.
Thanks, Sadie.
Oh gosh, I thought I just left the whole meeting. Like disappeared for a second. That's one thing. It's funny. I can talk to people all day. I can be prepared and feel prepared, but it's the technology that sends me into my red zone.
So someone pointed something out that I didn't know recently, and I read this online and it blew my mind. The millennial generation is the only one that had like a computer literacy class.
Mm,
Younger students were just kind of handed a Chromebook. And then
yeah.
people who didn't have that computer class were usually older than that age group as well. So there's like a small subset of technology understanding folks.
Yeah. Which we didn't have that. I still had typewriting class in high school. Typewriter. I learned how to type
No,
a typewriter.
though, my daughter is in elementary school and they are actually teaching them how to type on a computer again. And I thought that was so odd.
Wow, that's great.
Awesome. Well, that 15 minutes went by pretty fast. So we could start sharing out from each group. Anyone want to go first?
I don't
I can go
mind.
first. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
no, that's okay. Okay. Um, so we have, so just to be clear, like we're just going through our client and kind of what we came up with.
Yes. And
Okay.
anything else that was discussed that you feel like the group might benefit from? We had a couple of little sidebar conversations that I definitely want to share to get, some advice maybe from Tom and even the rest of the group. So yeah, anything
Yeah.
and everything.
Okay, great. So one of our group members, it wasn't myself, but definitely relatable, has a 10-year-old client on the autism spectrum and is very much interested in Marvel. So this young guy struggles understanding and labeling emotions. So the approach we talked about was using the zones for regulation and using different Marvel characters for showing different nonverbals for emotions. We also talked about the possibility of him being dysregulated by Marvel because the emotion gets so intense and excitable that it's possible to actually have a dysregulation through the zones. Um, and then also talked about how small progress is still progress. So starting out with maybe one or two emotions because he struggles with being asked, what are you feeling? I guess it's important to note that he is verbal. And so when he is asked, well, how are you feeling? What, emotions are you experiencing? He kind of gets shuts down. So starting off with maybe one or two Marvel characters with one or two emotions that he can recognize that he experiences, and then kind of growing from there. So I think in my brain, sometimes I can even think more binary, but it is possible to just start with like one or two of the zones and grow from there.
Yeah, we talked about building from success with these, and we don't want to give them something that is going to overwhelm them. So it's totally okay to start easy and small and then build from success. Okay. Thanks, Rachel.
Awesome. We talked about Marvel too, but we won't share that. Kara, you want to go next?
Yes, absolutely. So, this is a client that I shared. She is 15, developmentally around the age of 7 or 8. She is on the spectrum with additional delays and challenges as well. And her primary struggle is around regulation and staying physically safe within herself as well as around peers, specifically younger individuals. So we ended up going through kind of a little bit of her case and deciding that a zones approach would be good for her. She really she loves a lot of things, but Pokemon Go is a big one. So Brandy came up with the great idea of using the evolutions of her favorite Pokemon character for our different zones to look at. She identifies regularly happy, upset, frustrated, and angry. So those would be our zones that we would use, since she is confident in identifying those. So yeah, that was what we came up with.
That's good. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Who's next?
It's me, I'll share. I'm a sharer. Um, my group came up with a strategy focusing on voice volume. So with the individual that we are talking about, we decided that having 3 categories would be the best. So not having too many categories. So green, yellow, red. Green being the inside speaking voice, yellow being the you're getting loud, and red being you're using your outside voice. And then we talked about the priorities being that we didn't want to have too many options. We wanted to prioritize voice volume, and we thought color and number would be a great way of capturing attention. And as the conversation continued, we actually talked about using Powerpuff Girls and the 3 Powerpuff Girls. If you're familiar, Bubbles, who is shy and quiet, Blossom, who is, I guess, the most socially savvy of the group, and then Buttercup, who blows her top a lot. So those were our examples.
Thanks, Amanda.
I had no clue about that. Powerpuff characters.
Me either.
Very cool though. You learn something new every day. That's cool. Okay, Lauren's group.
Yes, and I'm going to go for our group as well. I told my group, jump in if I miss anything. So we talked about how to apply zones of regulation to use with an adult, and so the person who shared this as a client, or has this person as a client, he's in his mid-20s, and it's her first client with autism, and so she was excited to learn how to maybe apply some of these things, and working with him. He sounds like a really interesting person. He's a machinist. He is someone who enjoys paintball and 3D printing, and he's a woodworker as a hobby. When he was younger, he would have been diagnosed with Asperger's, so someone with autism, and some no cognitive challenges. But we did talk about that social communication is clearly a challenge for him, or is understandably a challenge. And then some of the things that he gets that he has a hard time with is emotional, identifying his emotions, and before, and especially kind of big emotions before he gets to that big emotion. And so we thought zones of regulation would be helpful to help him understand kind of like where he is before he gets to that red zone. We talked about, that he's someone who, values being, seen as he is as an adult, and so and values his privacy and feels stigmatized related to his diagnoses, which do include anxiety and depression. And so we talked about how we could use zones to support him in those moments of overwhelm, because he's somebody who gets overwhelmed, and so we might use pictures and words. But also make sure that the design of the tool is, looks like something an adult would use, as something that could remain private as he's needing to use it. And then also, involves him a lot in the process, and kind of along the whole way, that it's a partnership as he and his therapist designs that tool, and broadens out from the places that are most concerning for him. And then the other thing we talked about was maybe using his interest in woodworking, some sort of woodworking metaphors or pictures or visuals that kind of go with the different zones, and that he could teach her about woodworking, and they could work together to kind of figure out how those things might apply. So There you go.
Very cool. Thanks, Lauren. And I like the fact that you guys did it with an adult, because these are very much appropriate for adults too. They may look very different. They may not look as childish, but they absolutely can and should be used with adults as well.
Awesome. Then I think we're the last group. Is that right? Okay. Do we have another one? Okay.
No, I think you're the last one.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share as well, and my group will chime in as needed, and it'll be quick because we're running out of time. So we talked about a young boy around 3 years old, very active, gets agitated when things don't go his way, and has a love for Spider-Man. So we talked about the zones of regulation, maybe being in the shape of a building. So maybe Spider-Man, so one way could be like Spider-Man is climbing up the building, depending on where his emotions are. We also talked about maybe using the other Marvel and what's the other one? DC Comics.
DC Comics.
Yeah. If he didn't know the difference, because I learned also that there are certain fans of certain comics.
Oh yes, that's a whole thing.
Yeah, whole thing. So, but maybe Spider-Man is green. Batman, I know he's not Marvel, but Batman is yellow and Hulk is red. And, and then also using the language of, well, if you're, what does Spider-Man need to do to feel good and save the day? Okay, I get it. Hulk is ready to smash this building. Like what, like using some of the language around those comics, those superheroes, just to help him figure out what those emotions are. And then a question that I kind of had too was, which we talked through, but how do you, once you have this tool to use, how do you coach the child, or how do you get them to be invested in it? Sarah shared that, she spent a lot of time coaching the parents on how to use these tools. And then also, what do you do? Like, what are some ideas? What are some tips and tools about how to manipulate, or not manipulate, that's the wrong word, but how to move from one emotion to the other? How do you get that child or that person to regulate? What are those ways? And Sarah also shared, giving lots of choices or options of, okay, well, do a quiet activity to, bring yourself back down, that kind of thing. So those were some tips and tools that we had. Then also using tactile ways of maybe moving, like across a clothesline, moving something to the next level, like having that investment with that child, like, they are recognizing where they are and they are making the move, or they're watching their teacher or their parent move from one level to the other. So yeah.
Yep. I think that's an important point, because you can design all kinds of things. But then, yes, you do have to teach them how to use it. And I think sometimes that's where we struggle, is we feel like we've designed this wonderful thing. And then we give it to them. And when they don't know how to use it, we go, oh, well, that didn't work. But in reality, we haven't started to actually teach them how to use this tool. Yes, we want to make it as intuitive as we can, but there's still going to be some teaching that has to go on. Okay, so just from my perspective, I hope that everybody felt like they could hang up from this meeting and feel like they've got an idea or two of things that they can go back and implement, or try to implement back in your practice or your school or wherever you are. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you all for being here. And I will be in touch with the recording and with the schedule of next trainings. I also have to jump on to another meeting as well. So thank you. See you guys next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.